my entire thing today is going to be, let me just turn my phone on silent, is going to be data and DevOps. Like I am usually ex-Puppet engineer, did automation, did DevOps. I might just break out my slideshow and just show you where I got my some of my content from. Have you guys seen this before? It's the DevOps report. You have. This used to be produced by us meaning when I worked for Puppet. It's very good, very lengthy read, but encourage you to look at it. That's kind of the source of my presentation today. So we'll go through, what DevOps is, what we think it is, data, agility with data, and a couple of good ideas and bad ideas. So just so I get context, how many of you are like in the data space? Wow, really? So I might be talking to like a foreign language, I think, today. Look, I really like the slide. I think reflection is a big part of DevOps. Like, how many of you like sit down and do your retros on a regular basis? But at the same time, it's like what you take away from that retro is not just, hey, look, this worked well, this didn't work well, but what should we be looking at changing? And that's kind of the motivation for today. There are a couple of slides. I might have time to do a demo, but I encourage you to ask questions. Even if the slide deck doesn't finish, you'll get a copy of it. That's fine. So if you've got a question, feel free to put your hand up and ask. There's not many, so we can talk about questions and stuff that you have. So my background, I used to run, like before I was an engineer, I used to run the operations team at RMIT University. DevOps, we basically did agility. We used to build Red Hat servers in less than like 30 seconds, which was a thing at the time, using Puppet. How many of you guys have heard of M Collective? Yeah, so like M Collective, insanely powerful, but also very, very dead these days. It's like, it's an orchestration tool. We used to use it for things like data, pushing patches out, like identifying servers and that sort of stuff. I was also a Java developer. Please don't hate me. It was an interesting time in my life, I think. It was one of my first gigs. Okay, so this is from the State of DevOps report. It means many things to many people, but at its core, basically reducing friction is the intention of DevOps. So, what does that mean for you? The answer is, look, it's varied, right? So in my time as a data science guy, self-service, people creating data, being able to self-service things like, database schemas, events, and we'll talk about events in a second. Effectively, the entire thing of DevOps and data is to give you the ability to self-service and do stuff without friction. What's interesting is, like, in terms of the data space, I found very few people, and even us to some degree, like not very mature, but constantly evolving, constantly getting better or trying to get better within the data science space. So look, just to stop the screensaver, I'll keep the slides moving back and forth. It'll keep your life interesting too. So I don't know if you've seen this before. This is actually quite a powerful slide. Effectively, it says at the end of the day, the more frequent you deploy stuff, the faster you develop, and the faster you become agile. Effectively, the more you fail, the better you get. Everybody kind of tends to aim for like a high deployment frequency. I mean, that's the goal. All right, so quick poll. How many of you deploy once a week? Okay, how many of you deploy once a month? How many do once a day? How many do multiple times a day? Yeah, that's kind of like, that's the goal, right? You should be doing like multiple times a minute, CI/CD. And the point of this slide is like, look, the more you do it, you're not gonna be great at the start, but as you get better, your outcome is going to be better. Like your change failure rate, less than 5% is aspirational, but you'll get there if you do it. And that's kind of like one of the key takeaways of the DevOps report. It's like fail fast, but start by trying. So this is another survey question that was taken that I think is quite meaningful. if you ask yourself how much momentum you have at your organization, you have none to a little or some to a lot. So just again, quick poll, who's kind of in the middle, the blue area? Nobody? Who's at the top end, high? Like 2 or 3 people. I'm not going to ask who's at the low end because that's like, yeah, not good. This is the other thing that I've kind of taken away, like roles basically change. It's just verbiage, really. So how many of you have got a title of like DevOps engineer, that sort of stuff, or DevOps manager? Nobody? Basically, what this is saying is like a title is a title. It doesn't really mean a lot. Effectively, your role as an engineer or a software engineer is to enable people to move quickly. And again, so titles like systems administrator, they've vanished. Titles like operations and infrastructure engineer, kind of still around, but names and titles have changed. But the fact of the matter is the role hasn't. It kind of, your job is to remove friction, right? Effectively, titles shift with changing responsibilities, but at the end of the day, like trends really haven't. You can have a read of this in the DevOps report. It's quite a lengthy read about how people are changing, how their roles are changing. But effectively, what it's saying is, in our industry, nothing is the same as it was like 5 or 6 years ago, let alone a couple of months ago, right? Like things are different. This is kind of in line with what I was just talking about a few seconds ago. So in a DevOps team, as the term was becoming more and more popular, you can see in like 2018, a lot of people had that title. It's beginning to drop off again, but that doesn't mean like the role has changed. It's just the title has kind of vanished. I'd be interested to know, like in your spaces, like in terms of releasing, obviously everybody's hiring like more and more agile teams, right? Like that's a thing. Is that a thing that you guys have seen? I see some people nodding, some people kind of not nodding. Yeah. Effectively, the name is, I think, beginning to vanish again. But what's going to happen is like the role, the substantive role is still there. The work is still there. Before I get into the data thing, I might leave 5 minutes for questions at the end, maybe more. But we'll talk about what DevOps isn't. It's not cloud, it's not SecOps, it's all of these things put together. I think the fastest way to sum up DevOps is it's like your domain or your responsibility. I put in a joke in there, it's not your mother or your father, but it kind of is, right? It tells you what to do at work. It dictates how you should run your operations. And this is interesting. When I have a conversation with people, it varies on their domain. So, we were talking about like Westpac before, one of our customers. We were talking about another customer like, so hands up if you know what Kafka is. Kafka, used by Netflix, used by Uber, way to move fast data. For them, the DevOps space around Kafka, around data, and I'll go into this in a second, is very different than a bank. And that's kind of the point of like DevOps. It means different things for different people. I'm sure you all know this. I'm probably preaching to the converted. But yeah, like in a domain, it's effectively what you manage in your space as an outcome for your customers. Just to go into a little bit about data, how many of you are familiar with eventing? Maybe I'll get you to stop putting your hands up and I'll just keep talking. So events are a different way of looking at things. If you think about a traditional database table, for an event in data to happen, you have to have inserted something into a row, right? That's not the case anymore. An event typically is you react to something as it happens real time. That's what it means these days, right? So let me give you an example. I use this a lot. Let's say you walk into a room, you press the light switch to turn on the lights. The other way to think about it is when you walk into a room, the room should know that you've walked into it and the light should come on automatically. In today's model, effectively DevOps means you know when someone's walked into a room, right? Now, in terms of structuring your data, events are an ordered pattern of things that have happened. So in terms of things like, normalization, that used to be a really big thing in databases. Stuff is completely denormalized these days. In terms of storage, if you think about a traditional database, you're talking maybe gigs or maybe petabyte in the data world. Things are like teraflops. You've all heard of Fortnite, right? Obviously. Fortnite is actually, so Epic Games, one of our biggest customers. The way they shift data and the way they talk about data is very different. Things are very unstructured, things happen very quickly. They roll stuff out, they fail fast, and they fail quickly. We've talked about data, but not really like domain. So transactions, execution, security, lineage. Lineage means something very different. It means things like data source key. So I'll start with lineage and then we'll work through the rest of the domain. So the way to identify data is effectively its data source key, right? So let's say, my name's Sanvy, I've got an employee ID, but where did that data come from, right? Metadata about data is becoming more and more a real thing. DevOps is kind of catching up with this stuff about metadata. And it's related to domain. So let's say my employee ID, which is in SAP, the domain of SAP has things like, where he lives, my income, a whole bunch of stuff. The whole thing about DevOps is it's not just the data itself, but it's the metadata that's attached to that data source. So the other thing to keep in mind is there's evolution going on at the moment, and one of the big things is cloud events. CNCF, Cloud Native Computing Foundation, has released an RFC basically describing eventing. I would urge you to go and look at this. It's basically what we've been describing like the last 10 minutes, like data about your data, as weird as it sounds. Your data should be many things, but primarily immutable and identifiable. And this is what CNCF is. The other thing is there's context about data. Events don't exist in isolation. Everything's atomic. You bid on an item, you send an email, temperature of an item. There's also the concept of a stream, and I think I'll have time to do the demo. We'll go through a real life application of a click stream. There's behavior around data, as weird as that sounds. So I'll give you a real example of data and DevOps and things that move really quickly. If I told you as a user in a click stream, if you clicked on 2 particular pages, but I could manufacture the next 3 pages, and then on your 5th click, you would purchase something. That's very valuable information for a retailer, right? There's companies that do this. I'm sure you know. Too sure if I can say their name, but anyway, very big retailer. They watch your click stream and they inject stuff into your click stream to manipulate the outcome. So, you'll see an ad or you'll see a pop-up, and what will happen is you'll click on it, and then next thing you know, you've purchased something. Data hygiene is the other thing that we talk about a lot. Is data observable, which means, is it distributed? Does everybody know that an event has happened? Is it trusted? This is not a security thing. Do you know the data source? Do you trust it? Stateless, stateful, transactional. Basically, all these things are related to lineage. So what does this look like in pictures? I'm sure all of you have seen this before. This is point-to-point integration that ends up being a mess. I would ask you in here to identify the source of truth, and the answer is everything, right? Because everything is everywhere. Not very good, very messy. This is what we espouse. Basically, one event backbone, one source of truth. All your streaming data goes there, but that doesn't mean you don't have apps that live in isolation. Effectively, what happens is your streaming data lives in here. It's real time, but also you have your traditional data stores. And this is not just a Kafka thing, this is like an everything thing, right? Like when you're moving data around, and this is kind of what relates everything to DevOps. If you're moving stuff and you're moving it quickly, which is like agile, how do you get it from point A to point B real quick? And this is a challenge that we're seeing in the data space. Like I've written here, it should be less than 1 second. The reality is it may be or may not be. Just before I go back, are there any questions about this stuff? Like, no? So this is what it looks like in modern architecture, right? Your eventing is as a backbone. This could be Kafka, this could be whatever it is. But all your microservices, when an event happens inside of your ecosystem, everything else knows about it. And just to go back, this at the start. If you take this in the context of an event, like an event happens every microsecond, right? Like I'm talking, you guys are breathing, that sort of stuff, you're capturing it. The case for DevOps in data is even more powerful than it is in like software development. You need to be able to react to things that happen within microseconds. And the way people are doing this is with things like machine learning, with things like microservices, function as a service. But the reality is this: if you're not capturing data, you're missing out the ability to respond to your customers real time. I'll actually take you through a clickstream application in a second, but that's basically the whole point of this, right? Like data as a service, responding to the data real time, and your role, whether or not you're in the data space or the software space, is to be able to react to that event real time and give your customers what they want. I've talked about this before, like walking into a room and the light being turned on. Inversion of responsibility is a very important concept. Basically, what I'm saying is, look, in the real world, if I create an event and I publish it to everybody, I invert responsibility. So if I say, whenever somebody walks into a room, this event is going to trigger, if you as a consumer downstream want to react to somebody walking into a room, you have access to that event. And this is the other thing, right? Like, if you've given somebody the ability to see when things happen, you don't have to build stuff for them. You basically, give them the ability to respond and react. Everything has a price. When you decouple and you encapsulate and you allow people to self-service, it's like giving somebody the keys to your car, right? Like, you don't know what's going to come back. If they have an accident, no, there's going to be damage. But at the end of the day, if you teach people to drive properly or what to do with your event, they're going to be okay. And that's kind of the thing. Governance is another thing that we haven't really talked about, but yeah, enable people to help themselves. This is the old request response model versus the event-driven way. I mean, this is effectively DevOps by any other name, right? So in the request, the old way, I would tell others what to do. I would go and insert a row in a database. I would ask questions about your business model, then use your business logic to create data in your system. The event-driven way is very different. I publish an event, you know about that event, and then you go and figure out what you need to do. And I think that's the best thing, right? Like at the end of the day, if I turn your problem into not my problem, you kind of win. So effectively what you're doing is you're giving people inversion. Here's something that's happened in your business domain, you go and figure out what you need to do for this. There's been a couple of lessons I've learned, like running operations teams and like working with engineers and stuff. It's going to sound facetious. Some of it's a joke. Feel free not to laugh. So releases. Okay, so how many of you do releases in the middle of the week or at the start of the week? Yeah, you should all be doing releases on a Monday or a Wednesday, because the worst possible time to do a release is Friday at 3 p.m. Like, absolute worst. Luck is involved, some of it. Some of it is you're making your own for your own back. But like testing is a big part of doing releases. It sounds obvious, you'd be surprised how many people don't test stuff. But yeah, Friday, bad day. Now, I'll wrap up and then I'll take you through the clickstream application. DevOps really in the organization is up to you, right? But the whole takeaway of today, if there's one thing that you take away, is apply DevOps to your data, because it's done very seldomly, but when you do, it works really well. A couple of the customers we work with, like the large customers, so Afterpay is one of our customers, the way they think about things is very different. They've got a couple of talks up on YouTube and on our website. Watch them talk about data and DevOps and the evolution of things. Like it's a very inversion of self-service basically. Measure stuff. Measure your releases, measure your failures, measure your cadences, measure how far or how long it takes you to recover from an event. Like, I'm sure if I was to ask most of you, what's your mean time to recovery? You could give me your SLA, but could you all give me the last time you measured like how long it took you to recover from a failure? Out of curiosity, do you guys know that number internally? We do. 1, 2, who else? There's people that said yes, you should come for a free t-shirt. Give you up.